In fact, my colleague mentioned the PDS scandal. There is no proof whatsoever that the PDS scandal was cooked or, like he said, was cooked at the office of the vice president. There is absolutely no evidence to substantiate those claims. These are mere allegations and whatsoever. On the matter of until today, I never knew that renegotiation of power purchase agreement amounts to corruption. I never knew that. What is the corrupt element associated in the renegotiation of the power purchase agreement you refer to? I do not think that there has been any substantiated fact or proven evidence that there was any corruption or corrupt activities associated to what you mentioned. Now, on the Kenofoyata incident, you mentioned that anytime people stand up to fight corruption, they get antagonized by this government, and you mentioned Dom Levo. I mean, you're a student of law. You know that Dom Levo was not relieved of his position because of that. The person had retired. In fact, his days for serving the Ghanaian people had expired. And there are so many competent people more than Dom Levo. Is Dom Levo the only person in this country who can be the Auditor General? Sometimes, you see, let's not mislead Ghanaians when we get opportunity. Where in President Akufo-Addo's letter, or who has said that because Dom Levo was chasing Kenofoyata for stolen monies, that is why he was sacked? It is not true. Let's not engage in falsehoods and unnecessary name calling. We are young people. Let's not add that to our body politics. Let's stick to the facts and be sacrosanct with the facts. Because sometimes, you see, matters of corruption are sensitive matters. And that is why I'm choosing my words very carefully. I do not want to say things that do not exist. I do not want to blame people for things they have not done. I agree that if you have any evidence that members of the President Akufo-Addo administration have been engaged in corruption, my brother, bring out the evidence. I will partner with you. We'll write a petition to the state agencies, and then it will be taken from there. In fact, one of the greatest commitments of President Akufo-Addo in fighting corruption is the implementation of the RTI bill. In 2008, the NDC promised us that when voted for into power, they were going to make sure that the RTI or the Right to Information Act was enacted. They failed to do that. Interestingly, in their 2024 manifesto, they are promising Ghanaians again that when they come, they are going to make proper amendments to the RTI enactment. Something you failed to enact, you are now promising an amendment. But this government has enacted the Right to Information Act. We promised to set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor. We have set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor, which is currently running. And so, in summary, the whole point I want to make is that corruption is a very sensitive matter associated with corruption. And let's not also forget that, as I conclude, it is not only politicians who are engaged in corruption. When you go to the business circles, corruption do exist there. When you go to the private sector, there is corruption. Even here at TV3, there is corruption. And so corruption is a social canker that we must all look at, holistically and address it.
We see, you say that there is corruption in other sectors of national life apart from the public sector. I agree. But the difference is that the corruption at TV3 here does not affect the child in Bumprugu Yoyo. The difference is that when in your family, all right, you decide to do pilfer your mother's money, it is a private matter, and it does not, even though it's an unethical matter, its consequences are not national. So that's the first point about corruption in other sectors compared to government corruption where our taxpayers' monies are being siphoned. The second point is that you said that Mary Novation deal did not evince any instance of corruption. When you say a deal is 510 million and that it is high, it is bloated by about 100 million, and you want to renegotiate it, and you end up ballooning it to 1.3 million, it cannot be that there is no evidence of corruption. You are bloating the contract because you would want to, gain from that renegotiation. And then, again, a few matters on Martin Amidu saying that a Amajaro deal involves payment of bribe to the former vice president. If you remember, these matters were put to him when he was being interviewed or being vetted in Parliament for the office of the Special Prosecutor. What he told Parliament, which is on record, that all of these is perception and that people perceived that President Mahama and the administration was corrupt. He couldn't, adduce any scintilla of evidence in support of all of the things that previously he has said. However, when it came to President Akufo-Addo, when he worked with him for a few months, he said that President Akufo-Addo is the mother serpent of corruption and cited instances of interference in his work, which is on record. And he had to bolt with his tail in between his legs from the mother serpent of corruption. So that is President Akufo-Addo and Bawumia relative to President Mahama. But you see, to conclude, there are two important, and we need to look forward in terms of battling corruption. And there are two important pillars. One is to provide an institutional architecture that makes it difficult for people to steal public funds, and which also constitutes an architecture to prevent and punish corruption. So that's the one. And then two, political commitments, so that when your own appointees have engaged in act of corruption, you can refer them to investigating bodies to punish. Now, if you look at these two pillars and you compare President Mahama and Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, it is President Mahama's comparison. If you look at Akufo-Addo's conduct.
Name one simple architecture that President Mahama established to combat corruption. Just one.
I'm happy you're asking questions now. First of all, President Mahama passed a raft of legislations meant to provide robust financial and public management system and accountability. So it was under his regime that the Public Financial Management Act was passed. Under his regime, he amended the Anti-Money Laundering Act and provided for what is called accountable institutions. Now, these accountable institutions were designated to track proceeds of corruption and proceeds of crime. One of these institutions are lawyers. And so when lawyers are engaging clients, they are mandated by law to be able to track this. Apart from that, he also introduced a payroll modernization, where he introduced the GIFMIS, the Ghana Integrated Financial Management Information System, which was supposed to combat ghost names on the payroll. But in 2014, President Mahama also launched the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. The National Anti-Corruption Action Plan was a framework supposed to deal with corruption as it relates within the public sector and providing ethical guidelines as to how public officials must conduct themselves. The idea was for us to deal with corruption in a sustainable manner over a 10-year period, okay? And so in 2024, all right, in its 10th year, we are supposed to see the fruit of that National Anti-Corruption Action Plan manifesting. Unfortunately, it is this year that our corruption perception index and all of that is plummeting because of consistent and endemic levels of corruption. Now, when it also comes to personal commitment to fight corruption, because the institutions themselves cannot do creating the legislation institutions themselves may not be enough. You need personal commitment and a political will to be able to enforce this. All right? When it comes to personal commitment, President Mahama is the one on record to have prosecuted his own appointees. And you are talking about post-regime accountability. That is so easy to do. To have your Attorney General frame charges, take them to court, and get the court to convict. That's so easy to do. What is important is to deal with corruption as it is happening. And that's what President Mahama did. In the JIDA scandal, he ordered investigation into the affairs of JIDA. That led to the prosecution of his own MP, Abu Gapele, MP for Pagachiana. All right? Ironically, President Akufo-Addo granted him pardon, all right, in 2021. It was a very uncomfortable decision for President Mahama, but he had a political commitment to punish his own appointees, okay? Now, in November 2013, Victoria Hammer, Deputy Communication Minister, was heard on audio, okay, in an informal conversation, speaking to her friends that she would stay in politics until she makes $1 million. She didn't actually have that $1 million. She was heard on tape to be saying that. That audio alone appalled President Mahama enough that on 28 November 2013, he dismissed Victoria Hammer as Deputy Communication Minister. That is President Mahama for you. When actual $1 million, together with other currencies, were found under the bed of Cecilia Dapa, who is Akufo-Addo and Bawumia Sanitation Minister, even before investigation commenced, the minister had to resign. And the letter that Akufo-Addo wrote to the minister was to, assure her that he believed in her essentially stampeding, anti-corruption investigation. Because he's the first gentleman of the land. and the head of the national security and commander-in-chief of the armed forces is sort of exonerating the person who is yet to be investigated. That is so prejudicial to the work of the anti-corruption agency. So when it comes to legislations, when it comes to institutions, President Mahama stands tall. When it comes to political commitment, he demonstrated it in his administration. And that is why he has, come up with a number of policies that moving forward in the next 4 years, he would implement to combat corruption. As against the Bawumia's silence on corruption when it comes to his manifesto.
Clearly, if you look at the NPP manifesto, we have set out that we are going to use digitization to fight corruption. The NPP is concerned about preventing corruption than waiting for the corruption to happen before we come and talk plenty about it. So Dr. Bawumia's commitment in fighting corruption is paramount to him.
Where is this in the manifesto?
And in fact, it is very important to state that Dr. Bawumia is not a corrupt vice president.
Oh, okay,
Dr. Bawumia
when you ask me a question,
never engaged. I'll answer your question. Dr. Bawumia has never engaged in corruption. Dr. Bawumia has not appointed anybody to steal our 93 million Ghana cedis meant for poor traders at Makwala, Circle, Nima, and Mamobi. But John Mahama has appointed Sedinam Temaklo, who stole our 93 million Ghana cedis. To talk about corruption, if you want Ghanaians to trust you and your Women's Development Bank, go and bring Sedinam Temaklo to refund the 93 million cedis he stole from the Ghanaian people, the poor Ghanaian. But for Sedinam Temaklo, I never knew any woman would have the courage to steal 93 million Ghana cedis. Do you know what 93 million Ghana cedis can do for the community you mentioned at Tripoli? It can build about 1,500 chip compounds and build over 20 e-blocks for that community. But one woman who was appointed by your flag bearer, that today you are preaching that Ghanaians should vote for, stole that money. And nobody spoke anything about it. It took the intervention of Godfrey Dame to institute criminal charges against Madam Sedinam Temaklo. And today she has been convicted for 10 years. And even with that, she's nowhere to be found because John Mahama is even hiding her.